Welcome back to the Mind and Money podcast. I'm Val, a financial planner.
And I'm Sherry, a financial coach. And today we're going to tiptoe into a little bit of reality when it comes to retirement. It can be a little bit scary, and sometimes we have some false beliefs, and we want to give you a reality check. We don't want to be harsh. We don't want you to be beating yourselves up, but we want you to have a plan. So when it comes to retirement, Val, what are you seeing in some people that might not be as adequately prepared as you would like them to be?
To your point, I'm seeing a lot of those false beliefs, kind of like, well, when I'm 65, I'll be able to retire. There's this disconnect with the reality of what will income look like at 65? How much income will you need? Like, what will your expenses look like? And is that even possible? Is that true? We just kind of assign in our brain, like, I'd like to retire at 65 or I'd like to retire at 50. But then we're living through our 30s and our 40s and we're not actually putting things in place to make that a reality. The other piece that comes into play is tough decisions. So I want to retire at 65 and I don't want to change a thing about my lifestyle or a thing about what I do or about what I own. Okay. Here's the cost of the things that you're doing. If you don't change anything, one client in particular is more so when it comes to the sale of the property that they're living on. So if you really want to keep this property that is, I think it's probably close to $2,000 alone, just in terms of like property taxes and not the mortgage, just like property taxes and utilities, working until age 75/80 is going to be more realistic because CPP and old age security are not going to be enough. And what you've saved, because of doing a lot of hard things on their own, has led them to not have enough saved. So there's a couple kind of disconnecting beliefs there where it's like, well, everything's going to be fine, but it's not. Like, at some point we have to make some hard decisions. We can't just keep driving forward and like struggling, kind of like blinders on. Yeah, life's a struggle, but I'm grinding and it'll all turn out fine. It won't always turn out fine if we don't talk about things and make hard decisions and look at the numbers. So there's like a very big disconnect of like, I've got time and I'll be fine. What are you seeing with your clients when it comes to kind of the reality around retirement?
Well, the reality is that in a lot of situations, they have a big debt load that they're carrying. So we've talked about this before. You and I work together a lot with clients. So kind of like they get their budget, they get their debt down, and they're like, okay, now it's time to add more retirement savings into the plan. So kind of that time, kind of toss the baton to you to help them kind of see what that looks like. But the reality is that so many of my clients that typically have ADHD, and a lot of them are self-employed, is that they're not putting any money away for retirement. So then it just really catches up with them. And like, I follow a couple of really good people on social media who share like, hey, if you need to get to 2 million when you retire, if you start when you're 20, it's this little amount. If you start when you're 30, it's a little bit more. If you start when you're like 50, 55, 60, like you've got to put thousands of dollars away every month to be able to play catch up, because time in the market is really the key to growth. So even if you can only put $20 away, regardless of what age you are, start putting $20 away and then build that habit. And a lot of times people are waiting till later in life to have kids too, which can have the conflicting, do I put money away for my kids' education, or do I put money away for retirement, or do I split it? And that hard conversation is sometimes like, it's great that you want to help your child or children with education, but there are student loans, there are grants, there are other ways that your kids can still get that education. Also, there's ways that are a lot less expensive to get education, and college and university isn't always the answer, but that's an aside, maybe another episode. But, this analogy of you need to take care of yourself, because if you focus on investing for your children's education, but you're not putting money away for your retirement, that leaves you in a very difficult situation in the future, but it can also leave your children in a very difficult situation to be like, oh, mom and dad helped me with school, but now like they have to come and live at my house because they
Yeah.
didn't fund their retirement. So there's often give and take, and knowing it's okay to take care of yourself and your like the belief that like your kids will be all right and they'll manage. It's a harder pill to swallow than the, well, but I want to help them.
Yeah. And I think that analogy comes back to the putting your air mask on first or your oxygen on first when the plane's going down. So saving for yourself first. And there used to be, I'll say, more of a trend where, well, I'll sell my house and I'll downsize and I'll bank that, right? Invest that for retirement. That, with the real estate trends right now, isn't so popular. People are staying in their houses for longer. They're holding on to what they have. So that whole influx of cash at age 60, 65, or 70 isn't happening in the same way. And people think at, retirement planning at one point, you could have said, okay, your cost of living from today is going to be 70% of what it's going to, of like, you're going to spend 30% less in retirement. The difference isn't so big anymore. Yes, maybe you don't have teenagers eating your grocery bill to a crazy amount, but there's other pieces that come into play where we're not being as drastic when I'm working with clients and saying, okay, the household currently needs 7,000 to survive. We're still keeping it in and around that because lifestyle is going to change. Yeah, you might not have that high grocery bill, but you want to travel. So we're not shaving it down as much as we used to, right? So to your point, time, like I guess that's the message with this is to have a plan, sit down, look at the numbers. Don't just hope and pray that it's going to work out one day. Look at the numbers. Start putting something aside and like sit down with someone that you trust to do the right thing for you. And I think a lot of it comes to judgment too, like people that haven't put anything aside at a certain age or like, I know I should, but now I don't even want to talk about it because I don't have enough for someone to work with me. Or I see my friends and they've put so much more aside and there's a lot of shame, and then shame builds that wall and shame keeps us in and shame keeps us small. But that's counterproductive to what we want to do. So talk to someone that's going to make you feel empowered and help you to do those things. So that's the retirement reality that I'm seeing a lot of is disconnect with it actually being attainable and disconnect with taking action to make it happen.
Yep. And I think a lot of people too might misunderstand CPP. So we've said before, we're Canadian. So CPP is a Canadian pension plan, and it does pay out based on, and you can take it at a variety of different ages, depending on like, there's these calculations where the earlier you take it, the
less you
lower
get.
the amount is, the longer you wait, the more that you get added each month that you get. If you're looking online to see like what you think you're going to get paid out, what everybody gets paid out is very specific to your situation because it's based off of what your incomes have been throughout your earning careers. And you can actually go online and see exactly what your estimated payout would be based on your income amounts over the years. But yeah, it's not necessarily going to be the max amount. And very few people get the maximum amount.
And if you looked at like the average right now of CPP and old age security at age 65, maybe $1,500 a month. That's taxable. So if you have other incomes in there, it really depends on your tax bracket. Like we won't get into that. But that's not the point. Is it's not $1,500 a month in your hand. CPP and old age security, if you think of retirement investments like a stool, it's going to be a leg on that stool. You want to have that as a leg. You want to have personal investments as a leg. And if there's something through work, awesome. That's that third leg that just creates more stability. But we do not want the government to be our retirement plan.
And there's a lot of, I'm going to say this word, I'm going to make me sound like a grandma, but kerfuffle that like, don't depend on CPP. It's not going to be there when we're older. It's not stable. What's the reality of that? It's like somebody that's like just starting work now, is the CPP going to be there for them when they're retirement age?
At this point, I don't see why it wouldn't be. because people are going to continue to contribute into it. Yes, there's going to be a heavier draw out, but we have higher income earners. Like cyclically, I trust that it's going to work out.
Yep.
I don't have hard facts and hard data. That can kind of be like a separate episode on itself. But yeah, that's that. Even when was it Alberta that was recently talking about pulling out? Media makes a lot of noise, right? And then it creates that scarcity. But if that's the case and you have those beliefs, then you better be putting a whole bunch more away in your own personal investments.
Yep.
Like if that's your thoughts, and it is one that I always say to clients, we don't want to fully rely on it. And I always, with CPP anyways, you can pick what percentage they'll receive, right? So like maximum's 100%. I always err on less. So then we rely on it even less in our plan. Like we really, it's a slice in there. And then we want to make sure that our investments create a surplus. So then we're prepared if it's not a
Yep.
slice in the future.
And there have been changes by the government recently where they've increased the percentage for CPP and like the maximums and stuff like that. And they're increasing that and evaluating that all the time. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the uncertainty, whether it's going to be there for us, comes from our neighbors to the south where their social security, which I fully have done zero research in, but like there is more rumblings about it not
Mm-hmm.
being as secure. So know that like our system's completely different from theirs, and the government is
Yes.
constantly evaluating to make sure that we're putting in, like it's still being funded so that it doesn't get to the point where it collapses. Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
guarantees or anything. And the old age security part of it is like, goal, don't be eligible for old age security because your income each year is over and
Above the
above
threshold.
like the
Yeah.
thresholds to get old age security. And it's a great program for people that need it, but ideally, like knock on wood, I hopefully will not need it because we've got those other investments. And yeah, the house part of it is challenging too, because when you look at selling your house to buy another one, a lot of times the price isn't that different to downsize depending on the areas where you live and where you want to be. And moving is a hassle. And another piece of the puzzle too is empty nesters are not necessarily getting those empty nests as
Yes.
early on as they typically would. So it's not unusual to have adult children still living with you when you're like getting near to retirement age. And that plays a big factor because buying homes are not as attainable as they were for the older generations when we were buying homes, because house prices have increased significantly faster than our income. So it's another piece of the puzzle that you maybe can't downsize because of how many people you have on your household.
Yeah, and with most clients, unless they're to the point of very seriously like wanting to sell their house, we do not take it into account. It's an asset that grows at a very conservative rate because we don't know what the real estate market's going to do. So it's an asset that stays there, but we never cash in on it until that truly becomes something that is more realistic. And then at that time, we look at, okay, real estate markets. So that's really getting set aside until people are ready to say, okay, yeah, I want to do this. So when it comes to the retirement reality, it's looking at what is your retirement reality
and figuring out what you're willing or what will be able to be reduced from your budget. Maybe you're a 2-car family, you'll be able to go down to 1, but also what might need to be added in. If you're an employee with benefits right now and you've got like regular medications or regular expenses, that's something that's going to be added in that you're going to have to either cover out of pocket or get your own benefits. So there's a lot of moving pieces to what is your budget going to look like when you retire. And we don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know what inflation is going to be like. And we don't know exactly how far a dollar today is going to go when you retire at 65 or 55 or whatever that age is. So it's like, there's a lot of moving pieces, and some of them we are never going to be able to fill in until they get here. But if you're avoiding all of them, then you're really doing yourself a disservice. Maybe you sit down with Val and Val's like, hey, you need to put $500 away now to live the same lifestyle 20 years from now. And you're like, there's no way I can do that. And that can create avoidance, but like, okay, maybe you can do 100. and
Yeah.
then
So then
add a
what does
little
that
bit as you
create?
go. Yep.
Yes. And for some clients we look at if the RESPs is really important to them, balancing still some personal, but then knowing that after our ESPs are done for the kids, that money is now still earmarked into retirement. Right. So like
Yep.
don't get used to that back in your budget. That's coming over here. And just helping to, yeah, not be gloom and doom, but just create
Yep.
realistic plans and
Yep.
seeing what they can do. So,
And
okay,
maybe
that's our ramble.
maybe that catalyst of, say you have a meeting with Val and Val's like, $500 is the number every month. That could be your like eye-opening, holy crap. So my opening holy crap with my money was getting fired. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think those can be really transformative, because when you have that holy crap, then you're like, okay, how do we find $500 a month? Or how do we get closer to that
Yep.
today so that we can not have to drastically change our lifestyle down the road when we retire and still be able to retire? Because it's a give and take, right? We don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know how long we're going to be in retirement, but we can put some guesstimates together and think about, okay, it's like cutting some things today, we can think of it as a sacrifice, or we can think of it as like taking care of our future selves, which is so
Yeah.
important.
Yes. Yeah. There's like the idea of robbing from tomorrow's joy, but we're actually investing in tomorrow's joy. So cheesy,
Yep.
but it's true.
If you're Canadian and you don't know your reality, yes, you can go in an online calculator and type it in, but like seeing a professional that you jive with and you get a good vibe with, like that's,
yes,
not everybody's
huge.
set to manage their own investments. So don't try and do it if it makes you feel uncomfortable, that like, and you're just going to end up still avoiding it, but then you're managing your own investments and you're not looking at it. Like that's, don't try and do something. I'm not saying don't try it if it's like slightly outside of your comfort zone, but if you just feel
Right.
all the fear and all the stress, like it's not meant for everybody. So
No.
seek a
100%.
professional. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're glad you've been here talking about retirement realities. I know it's probably maybe been a little hard to hear, but we are glad that you stuck around and listened, and we can't wait to see you next time on the Mind and Money podcast.